The morning sun filtered through the tall oaks lining Sunridge Falls, casting soft shadows on the sidewalks of our new neighborhood. It had only been 2 weeks since my daughter Sierra and I moved here, looking for peace after a year of chaos. My husband, a decorated army medic, had passed away suddenly, and the grief swallowed us whole. I thought a fresh start in a quiet upscale community would help us breathe again. Sierra is 13, bright, intuitive, and fiercely artistic. She also has autism and a speech delay, which makes the world treat her like a puzzle it doesn't want to solve. Her best friend is her communication tablet, a device that lets her express her thoughts, emotions, and drawings with just a few taps. Every morning, we take a gentle walk through the neighborhood. Routine calms her. Trees, birds, soft wind. These are her safe places. That morning felt no different. Sierra wanted to stop by the shaded community garden just down the path, sketch the butterflies for a school project. I let her stay there while I ran back home, barely 3 minutes away, to grab the thermos I'd forgotten. When I returned, nothing was the same. As I walked back toward the garden with my coffee in hand, I noticed a small crowd gathering near the benches. My pace quickened. A voice, sharp and grating, rose above the murmurs. I heard Sierra's name. Then I saw her. She was standing frozen near the flower beds, shoulders tense, eyes wide with panic. Her communication tablet was gone. In its place stood a woman in a bright red blazer and stiff posture, waving the device like it was contraband. I reached the scene just in time to hear her say, "Loitering is against HOA regulations. This is a private space, not a playground for wanderers." My stomach dropped. "That's my daughter," I said, stepping between them. The woman barely looked at me. "And I'm Cheryl Langston, Vice President of the Sunridge Falls HOA. I caught this young person lurking around and pointing this device at people, filming them without consent. Highly inappropriate." I turned to Sierra, who was trembling, her hands fluttering near her chest, the way they always did when she felt overwhelmed. Without her tablet, she couldn't explain what happened. Cheryl held it just out of reach, fingers tight around it like it was evidence in a crime. "She was drawing," I said slowly, controlling my breath. "The tablet is how she communicates. Give it back." Cheryl crossed her arms. "That's not my problem. I've already called community security. Until they arrive, I'm detaining her for questioning. She refused to answer when I spoke to her, which makes her behavior even more suspicious." "She's nonverbal," I said, trying to stay calm. "She wasn't ignoring you. She was scared." "Well," Cheryl snapped, "maybe next time you should supervise her instead of letting her wander like a stray. Rules exist for a reason." Sierra's eyes filled with tears, and I felt my pulse shift from concern to fire. Cheryl's grip on the tablet tightened as I took a step forward. She didn't flinch. If anything, her expression hardened, as though I were the one causing trouble. Sierra stood between us, unmoving, her breathing shallow and fast. I knelt down to her level, gently placing my hand on her arm. "It's okay, sweetie. I'm here now." She didn't speak, of course. She couldn't. But her eyes flicked to mine, searching for reassurance, clinging to any sense of safety. "I need you to hand that device back," I said, rising again to meet Cheryl eye to eye. She tilted her head, lips twitching with disdain. "I already told you, this child, your child, is in violation of community guidelines, filming residents, loitering in unsupervised areas. I have a duty to uphold the rules." "She wasn't filming. That's her communication device," I repeated, slower this time, as if logic might finally get through. Cheryl sneered. "I don't care what fancy label you put on it. Without proper supervision and approval, she's a liability. I have every right to restrict access to private property." Before I could respond, A white golf cart with a blinking orange light pulled up. HOA security. Two men in matching khakis stepped out like they'd been trained by a retired mall cop. Cheryl waved them over dramatically like she was directing traffic. "That's the one," she said, pointing to Sierra. She was disturbing residents, and this woman showed up late claiming to be her guardian. The younger guard looked uncertain. She's a kid, Mom." "An unregistered one," Cheryl snapped. "Do your job." The guards hesitated, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. I pulled my phone from my pocket and began recording. "My name is Maya Brooks. I'm this child's legal guardian. I'm also a licensed attorney. And right now you're all participating in the unlawful detainment of a minor with a recognized disability." Cheryl snorted. "You lawyers think everything's about rights. Maybe focus on parenting for once." Sierra started rocking slightly, overwhelmed by the noise, the crowd, the confusion. Her arms hugged her chest, and she looked like she wanted to disappear. "Give her the tablet," I said, this time with steel in my voice. "Absolutely not," Cheryl said, holding it behind her back. "This is now evidence." That was the moment I knew this wasn't going to be a misunderstanding we could walk away from. This was war, and she had no idea who she'd just picked a fight with. I took a slow step forward, raising my voice just enough to cut through the murmurs of the gathering crowd. "You're holding my daughter's only means of communication hostage. That's not just cruel, it's a violation of federal law." Cheryl scoffed, barely sparing me a glance. "I don't care what dramatic spin you're trying to put on this. Children who can't behave in public shouldn't be in public." I reached into my tote bag and pulled out my wallet, flipping it open to reveal my bar card and photo ID. Maya Brooks, licensed attorney, bar number 64-211-8723, specializing in civil rights and disability law. She blinked, faltered, then quickly composed herself. "This isn't a courtroom, Miss Brooks. You don't get to play lawyer here. This is Sunridge Falls. We operate under HOA authority, not political correctness." "That child," I said, pointing to Sierra, who was crouched on the grass now, silently mouthing words without her device, "has rights protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. You are actively denying her access to her medical equipment and causing her emotional trauma." "You can call it what you like," Cheryl said, tone sharp. "To me, it's a case of a suspicious individual with a device pointed at our homes and no verbal response when questioned. I don't make exceptions just because someone waves around a diagnosis." I lifted my phone again and angled it toward Cheryl. "You're now being recorded, Cheryl Langston, Vice President of the HOA. You've admitted on camera to detaining a disabled child, confiscating her assistive technology, and refusing to return it when asked by her legal guardian. I suggest you stop talking." Her eyes darted to the growing crowd. Phones were up, neighbors were watching, some whispering, others outright shaking their heads. Her confident stance wavered. "I have every right," she started. "You don't," I said flatly. "You never did." The older security officer pulled Cheryl aside, lowering his voice. She protested, waving her hands, but I caught a glimpse of uncertainty in her expression. For the first time, the mask cracked. I knelt beside Sierra again and whispered, "Almost over, baby girl. You did nothing wrong." She nodded once, slowly, eyes still wide, but no longer full of panic. Her trust in me had never wavered, and now neither would mine. The tension hung thick in the humid morning air as neighbors began inching closer, their curiosity turning into concern. One by one, phones were raised, capturing everything. Whispers passed through the crowd, some recognizing Cheryl's name, others beginning to question the story they were being fed. A man in jogging clothes stepped forward. I recognized him from the corner townhouse. Eric Tang. He looked between me, Sierra, and Cheryl, then finally said, "My daughter's nonverbal too. That's not loitering. That's just a kid trying to exist." A few others nodded. An older woman muttered, "She's done this before, you know. Called security on the Thompson's son last month just for sitting on the curb with his headphones." Another neighbor added, "Didn't she file a noise complaint against a toddler's birthday party last year?" Cheryl spun toward them, her voice defensive. "The rules are in place to keep our community safe. You all know that. I'm just doing my job." But her voice didn't carry the same weight anymore. The performance was falling apart. More people were watching than agreeing. And then we heard the sirens. A black and white cruiser rolled up, lights flashing but no siren. 2 officers stepped out, 1 male, 1 female. The female officer scanned the crowd, then approached with a cautious but authoritative tone. "We received a report of a disturbance involving a minor. Who's the parent?" "I am," I said, stepping forward and handing her my ID and bar card. "Maya Brooks. That's my daughter, Sierra. She has autism and a speech delay. This woman detained her and took her communication device." The officer frowned, looking to Cheryl, who was already mid-explanation. "This child was alone and suspicious. I called HOA security, and they agreed something wasn't right. She was sitting quietly in a public garden," I cut in, voice steady. "And when she didn't respond to questions, Cheryl confiscated her medical device and refused to return it. I have everything recorded, so do at least 10 people standing right here." The officer turned to the crowd. A few phones went up in confirmation. The other officer began asking questions, separating Cheryl and the security guards. Sierra, still crouched beside the bench, stared at the ground, arms wrapped tight around her knees. I crouched beside her. "They're here now. It's going to be okay." This time, she reached for my hand. Small, warm, steady. The tide had shifted, and everyone could feel it. One of the officers stepped away to speak with the security guards, while the other requested to see the tablet Cheryl was still clutching like a trophy. Reluctantly, she handed it over, but not before muttering something about entitled parents weaponizing disabilities. The officer turned the screen on, revealing Sierra's most recent drawings, soft pencil strokes of butterflies and trees, layered with word bubbles from her text-to-speech software. Not a single photo or video, just art, just her voice. "This is her communication device?" the officer asked, looking at me. "Yes. It's classified as assistive technology under ADA law. Taking it from her wasn't just morally wrong. It's a federal violation." The officer nodded grimly, then turned toward Cheryl, who was now trying to justify her actions to the younger officer. "You don't understand," she insisted. "There's been a pattern of disruptions lately. We have to act before something serious happens. That girl was unresponsive and lurking." "She's a child," the officer cut her off, "with a disability, and you had no authority to detain her or confiscate anything." Cheryl opened her mouth to protest, but it was too late. The female officer produced handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for false imprisonment, interference with medical equipment, and harassment of a minor. You have the right to remain silent." "You're arresting me," Cheryl shrieked. "I'm the victim here. I was trying to protect the community." "You're being recorded," someone in the crowd called out, phone still aimed at her. As the handcuffs clicked shut, Cheryl's carefully constructed composure shattered. She thrashed against the officers, her bright red blazer twisted at the seams. "I know the mayor. I'll have your badges," she screamed as they led her toward the squad car. But the neighbors weren't listening. No one was rushing to her defense. Not this time. I walked over to Sierra, gently placing the tablet in her lap. Her fingers traced it like she was greeting an old friend. A soft, robotic voice soon emerged from the device. "Mum, stay. Close. I'm right here, honey, I whispered. And no one's taking anything from you ever again. For the first time that morning, Sierra smiled. And in that moment, it was Cheryl's silence, not Sierra's, that filled the air. The days that followed felt like watching a slow wave wash away years of silence. What started as a confrontation in a garden became a spark that lit a fire across the entire community. Video footage of Cheryl's arrest made its way online, shared by parents, disability advocates, and even local news outlets. The sight of her shouting about rules while a child clutched her communication device broke hearts and opened eyes. Sunridge Falls, once proud of its picture-perfect lawns and strict HOA bylaws, began to re-evaluate what it actually stood for. Within a week, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. For the first time, residents showed up in droves, not to complain about noise violations or mailbox colors, but to demand change. Cheryl was removed from her position unanimously. A review committee was formed, this time with voices from parents, seniors, and residents with disabilities. New policies emerged: clear protections for neurodiverse children, proper training for security, and designated inclusive zones where all kids could just be kids. The garden where it all happened was transformed. Out went the brittle signs warning authorized residents only, and in came murals, soft benches, and a small plaque near the entrance that read, "Every voice matters, no matter how it speaks." Neighbors who had once kept to themselves now stopped to say hello. Eric Tang invited Sierra over for art days with his daughter. Elderly residents who'd once feared disruption brought flowers to the garden and snacks for the kids. The same community that had once turned its back was now reaching out, slowly but genuinely. Sierra began drawing again, her lines steadier, her butterflies brighter. And though she never spoke the words aloud, I knew what she was saying. People saw her now, not as a disruption, not as an exception, but as someone who belonged. It was a cool Saturday morning when the new sign was unveiled. A quiet ceremony with no speeches, no pomp, just neighbors gathered beneath the trees, standing together in a way they never had before. The community garden now had a new name: Sierra's Grove. Painted in soft pastels with vines curling around the letters, it looked like something from her drawings. She sat in her favorite spot beneath the big elm tree, tablet resting on her lap, watching the butterflies she once sketched alone. I stood beside her, taking in the scene, the laughter of children, the hum of conversation, the sunlight warming the stone path. This place, once a symbol of exclusion, had become a sanctuary of understanding, and all because one girl refused to shrink in the face of injustice. Later that evening, as I tucked her into bed, Sierra typed a message and handed me the tablet. "Thank you for hearing me, even when others didn't." I kissed her forehead, blinking back tears. "Always, sweetheart. Always." In a world full of noise, it had taken silence to teach them how to listen. And now, through compassion and courage, our community had found its voice. One that finally knew how to say, "Welcome home."